and welcome to the January 12th, 2021 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using as our state and community continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And thank you again for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager to introduce the first topic, the 5-year report on the levy, library levy.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm joined this afternoon by Library Director Will O'Hearn. And before I turn it over to him, which will be very quick, I just want to give a lot of just kind of a big shout out to the library in particular for how they showed up through the pandemic for our community. And I think back about like when I was a kid and I went to the library, and it was really just about kind of a community center, but a place where you really just did check out books and kind of come and go. It has really become, in some ways, like the Red Cross, some version of the Red Cross of the city, and involved in so many things that keep us going. And when we talk about one of our core leadership values at the city is building trust and confidence, I think the library is one of those places that it does that. And so I just wanted to say thank you to all the staff at the library and to you, Will, before you even get started for how you've led us through the pandemic.
Thank you so much for those incredibly kind words. I appreciate that, Sarah. I'll make sure to pass that on to our team there. They deserve that, so thank you. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here. I have a PowerPoint here today. Can you guys see that okay? Good, okay, thanks. That's the new, can you hear me now? Can you see my screen? Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Will O'Hearn, Library Service Director here. I'm proud to present the Year 5 Eugene Public Library Levy Report to you today here at City Council. So back in 2016, our community voted for a 5-year levy to help support library operations. And with that support, we promised to provide more programs and services, more hours and access, and more materials and technology with those funds. These goals were based on community feedback, hearing what our community wanted from our library with that additional funding. While the pandemic has changed the course of how we've worked towards these goals remain a constant of what our community wants from its library. We'll talk more today about how we fulfill those goals and promises with that additional funding and what the library has done with that support to help care more for its community. During the pandemic, one thing that's come into focus is how much the library is a lifeline for our community, a critical component in folks' lives. An example that showcases this: on the first day we opened the library fully physically back in August of 2020, we had someone who couldn't access their bank account since March of 2020 when we had to close our physical doors. And when we also had an unhoused individual share that they were so relieved to be able to check back with their family online, as they'd only been able to check in once or twice since March of 2020. And that's really just from the first day we opened. There are countless other stories of the library's impact on people's lives in the past almost now 2 years. The pandemic has impacted people in different ways, and we've stepped up to help serve people to meet those diverse needs. With that in mind, we've shifted our focus to community access, responding to the pandemic to support our community, and planning for the future to emerge stronger. Let's talk about those promises and show how we shifted that focus. So the first promise was more hours and access. As you can see from this slide, we were able to accomplish that from day one of the levy, opening 40 plus more hours of operations per week for more access, opening for longer on Sundays at the downtown library, and for many more hours at our Bethel and Sheldon locations. So despite the pandemic's impact on our staffing and processes, we're proud to have all those hours back here today. And this promise is crucial as it allowed us, our community, to access our buildings and services during a wide range of times. I also wanted to note we checked out 1.6 million items during this financial year, which is a little over half of what we normally circulate, but we're pleased about that given the impact of the pandemic. Access for our community and breaking down barriers to access so everyone could rely on the valuable breadth and depth of resources the library has to offer has been one of our guiding forces, which has been central to many of the accomplishments of our library during the pandemic. As you can see, as noted on the slide here, we have a lot of ways we focus on access, and I'll touch a few more in detail. We've been able to get library cards to all students who attend 4J or Bethel schools, regardless of where they live, partnered with both the school districts, the Library Foundation, to help with resources and turn our falling third grade reading levels around. We also added almost 5,000 new card holders, 1,500 of which were students from our Cards for All program in partnership with, again, 4J Bethel Foundational Library. Additionally, we eliminated all fines on youth material to help further support kids and their families and promote access and equity. We've received a lot of positive feedback and folks sharing that they feel they can use our library without fear, again, furthering access. In fact, we are looking at potentially expanding that to all of our collections. The American Library Association has it as a best practice, as fines are an economic barrier to usage and a form of social inequity. We've also focused on making our buildings more accessible during this time. For example, we've installed hearing loops so folks who are hard of hearing can better interact with our team and engage with patrons and programs. We've also installed automatic door openers in our restrooms in all our facilities. It's also critical to note that we never close the public fully. Even when we had to close our physical doors, we found ways to serve our community and to open our virtual doors as wide as possible, staffing both the phone line and our chat line during the beginning of the pandemic when we knew misinformation was out there. And while we've had to do it differently than we have in the past, we continue to focus on access in our services, doing as much as we can safely. We wanted to meet our community where they're at to ensure all had equitable access to our resources. One of our other promises, our next one, was more programs and services. Within that promise was a promise to increase our events by over 1/3 of the levy's life. We averaged about 1,200 programs a year before the levy, so our goal was to average 1,800 a year during the levy. While we hit that goal early in the pandemic with almost 2,300 programs in year 3 of the levy, needless to say, the pandemic has dramatically impacted this goal, and we ended up with 263 online programs in year 5 of the levy. To pivot how we made sure our community had access to enriching activities, we've provided a different activity kit each week, sometimes partnering with other organizations such as the Museum of Natural and Cultural History, which we are also ensuring is now in both Spanish and English and promoting BIPOC creators. We've given out almost 12,000 kits last FY in the year 5 of the levy. We've also installed bilingual story walks in our parks so that folks can safely enjoy a stroll through the first class parks here in Eugene and read a kid's book with their family in English or Spanish as they walk through the park. Again, our focus is on meeting folks where they are at, wherever they're at. One notable area of impact for us was partnering with Lane County Workforce. During the pandemic, there were so many unemployment claims that folks who helped people get jobs were displaced from their normal physical location to make room for folks who were processing all those unemployment claims. While many of the clients could transition to a virtual environment, the most vulnerable, either those who didn't have the technology or the skills to transition to a virtual environment, were left behind. We help provide that important physical location for these folks, and it's quietly become one of our greatest successes during the pandemic, helping with resumes, applications, and interviewing skills, and even providing a spot where folks can have a safe virtual interview online, because that's the way things are working right now, as we know here in City Council, to make sure folks can get back to work. We've helped hundreds of folks through our partnership that's been going on since the fall of 2020. One of our other promises was to have more materials and technology. And we've succeeded at returning the library's collection to pre-recession levels with the support the levy has provided the community. Because of that, we're now focused on maintaining that collection. We always need to make sure it's fresh and relevant for today, and of course, diverse, which we'll touch a little bit more on how important that is later. We've also seen about a 65 to 70% increase in our e-resources, things that are normally would find physically in electronic version, like ebooks, e-audiobooks, movies, etc., during the first part of the pandemic. And we're seeing a sustained 25% increase in those e-resources still to this day. We don't think that number is going to drop, and we'll stick with that moving forward to continue expanding digital resources for our community. One thing we wanted to call out under more materials and technology was our maker of things. We wanted to be sure people can use as many of our collections as possible despite the pandemic. One area that isn't really conducive space for the pandemic, service for the pandemic, is our maker hub. It's a very small space and only about 2 folks could be there at a time, with at least 1 staff or volunteer needed to be in there as well. Knowing that really wasn't an efficient way to operate, we looked through our makerspace and thought of how we can get those resources into folks' hands. We found that we could put many items, such as sewing machines, button makers, and audio recorders, to name a few, in portable containers. And rather than folks coming to the library to use the items, we started checking them out at all 3 of our locations to our patrons so they can access them at home. This allows even more access than before, as folks can check out these items at our branch locations and not just utilize them in our downtown library space. The program has been very successful, beyond our expectations, actually. It's been so successful that we're looking at ways to expand and develop the Library of Things collection even more fully and robustly in the future. We talked a little bit about diversity in the collection earlier, and we wanted to share some wonderful feedback about the growing diversity of our collection here, which has been one of our focuses in our collection in particular. During the pandemic, we worked to increase the diversity, diverse and BIPOC authors in our collection, and we've ensured that 30% of what we purchase from today on is written from diverse and BIPOC authors. We've been very intentional about this effort, and we do that because it's so important that we see the world through others' eyes, and storytelling and literature is an exceptionally effective way of doing that. We need to ensure we have as many opportunities to have windows. In the library world, we call them windows and mirrors. Windows, which are stories and experiences from folks different from ourselves, and mirrors, stories and experience from folks similar to us. Literature transforms human experience, reflects it back to us, and gives us insight into other worlds. In that reflection or window, we can see our own lives or others' lives as part of the larger human experience. Literature gives us empathy for others and validates our own perspectives. Since everyone's background is different, it is absolutely vital that we have both of those things for everyone in here in our diverse community in Eugene. And it's not always about purchasing the items, but also putting them for folks to see and for us to highlight specifically. So in addition to purchasing those items, we're making sure that we have 30% of our displays are by diverse or BIPOC authors to help boost those voices and perspectives we all need. Another area we want to call out here in technology is our hotspot. One area that comes to fruition is that addition of hotspots to our collection. If you don't know, a hotspot is a small device that emits Wi-Fi for folks to use the internet wherever they're at, as long as they have cell service. Essentially, we're checking out the internet for folks to use. The internet and online access have gone for something that's important to have to an absolutely essential service during the pandemic, to go to work, to go to school, to stay connected with loved ones, to be able to access services that no longer have an in-person facility, and to stay in touch with all the latest news and developments. We recognize how the pandemic has impacted folks' lives and information needs, and wanted to meet folks where they are at again. We've offered 500 hotspots to our community, the largest collection in the state, and we're circulating 250 of them to our community, and almost all of them have been continuously checked out since we started offering them. We also want to be thoughtful on how we utilize them and allotted the other 250 hotspots to check out, and we've utilized the other 250 hotspots to check out to organizations that help serve vulnerable and underserved populations. Places like Downtown Ambassadors, participants at the Safe Sleep sites, community supported shelters, and CORE, just naming a few of the groups we're working with. Reports indicate that hotspots have been incredibly helpful. We want to be intentional about how we use these hotspots and work with these agencies to truly connect the disconnected, making the most significant and positive impact we could with this resource. Collaboration and partnerships and how we can best serve our whole community has been a focus for us during this time. United we stand, and we need to unite more than ever to ensure our community can recover as fully as possible from this highly challenging period. So the levy is currently set at $2.7 million that year, the year that it was financial year there. We spent variable amounts each year according to needs, and we budgeted and spent $2.2 million for the year 5 of the levy. During the pandemic, our focus has been consistent to give our community as much access as possible in these uncertain and challenging times. Our values have been reflected in that focus, acting as guiding principles on our pandemic-related strategic plan, which we're calling the Roadmap to Recovery. Our values have been 1, flexibility, recognizing that there was and still is much unknown ahead of us, and we need to be flexible to serve our community. 2, accessibility, enabling fair and universal access to valuable resource our community needs. 3, equity. Equity, diversity, and inclusion are central to the promotion and practice of intellectual freedom, quote from the ALA there. And we recognize that equity comes through increased diversity in our services, programs, and collections. And 4th, last but not least, value is safety. We've lived by the mantra to serve our community as much as we can possibly safely. Patron safety is paramount to our success and to the community's perception of Eugene Public Library as a safe, welcoming, and accessible organization. As we look to the future to emerge stronger and more able to serve our community, we are currently in the planning stage to be more intentional and put our shoulder behind community engagement for the coming year. We are excited to embark on that project to look for opportunities for the library to continue to focus on access and better help Eugene thrive as we recover from the pandemic together. I also did want to note that our library has recently awarded a 4-star library award winner for 2021, which means we are recognized for being in the top 1% nationwide for excellence in cost-effective service delivery. It's quite an honor, kind of like the Oscars of the library world, and shows the impact our community's investment in our library is making and the importance our library has placed on stewarding that support wisely and strategically. With that, I wanted to last but not least mention how important our whole library team is and how well they've pivoted given these circumstances. They've always kept their eye towards supporting the community as much as we can safely and eliminating as many barriers to access for our community as possible. They deserve a huge kudos, and I appreciate how they've continued to serve our public during this challenging time. Thank you very much, Eugene Public Library staff. You make the library what it is today, and I'm sincerely proud and honored to work alongside you. And with that, I want to say thank you for your time and attention and your leadership during this challenging time. I'm truly grateful for that.
Thank you so much. Everything about this is exciting and inspiring. We're so grateful for your leadership, for the teams that pull all of these pieces together. I was so impressed by the packet, and now hearing you sort of dive into sort of some of the highlights. We're just in your debt for the work that you and your staff have done. And thank you very much. And I see a lineup of counselors who wish to speak. And so I will turn it over first to Emily.
Thank you. Thank you, Will, and the whole staff. I'm always looking for the happy in these troubled times. Here's some happy. When the levy came up, I voted for it, but I really thought it should come from general fund, which is not possible, even more so now. I think this is a great investment. It was a really wise decision on the part of the public, and that it's paying off in so many ways because the world changed from when we voted for the levy the first time, and the library didn't get stuck. It shifted fast as anybody could, and the benefits to each of us have been huge, even if we didn't go. I'm in my council cubicle, and I picked this one because it's got part of a window. And from my window, I am looking at the front door of the library. So I can tell you it is used quite a bit, and for a huge range of the population. We have so many needs. And it's fascinating to me how, like Sarah, growing up, the library was a magical place of books. I lived in books. Tells you a lot about my social life. And it has totally, still thank you for the books, but shifted to really being the community center. I'd like more community centers, but it's vital, and that it's more than information. The outreach to our people and the help with getting jobs and connections, the Wi-Fi stations, the charging stations. If you don't have a house, you even more have to have a phone, and a phone's no good if it isn't charged. I'm incredibly grateful for the hotspots, for students, for families that just can't afford it, and for the vulnerable. I know people in safe spots who have taken the hotspots out, the whole camp benefits, and they return them. That's just a huge thing to be taken care of. And the makerspace, once I saw it when I started being counselor, I just wanted to live over there, but I haven't had the time. And I've advocated for moving up to the 4th floor, get that central services out of there and let us go make things. So being able to lend the equipment so that people can continue to use it, and that we've now reached out to a whole bunch of people who couldn't use it before because they couldn't come to the maker station. Similar to, we're now on Zoom, someday I hope in person also. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a silver lining how much the library has supported everyone and continued to our growth as a community. And I thank you so very much. Look at that timing.
Well done. Well done. Matt and then Randy.
Thanks, Mayor. I echo Councilor Semple's gushing and gratitude for the library. Will, thank you. Good to see you. Will and I partnered together to be completely transparent when I was on the Library Foundation Board. And I want to thank council before me for the support of advancing the levy before my time on council. And I want to express gratitude to the voters here in Eugene who stood behind the library in a big way. So thank you. Thank you to the library for the robust partnership with Lane County Workforce. Is there data, or are there data, Will, on how many persons who utilized the library services to secure employment moved on to secure said employment? Do we have any? Is there any way to get data points on that?
We don't have that data at this time. I know we've helped hundreds of people, over 200. We can check to see and follow up to see if there's data on how many people actually acquired a position. That's something we can see if they keep data on that. We can reach out to WorkSource Lane County. Great,
thank you. Shakespeare said, I believe in King Lear, men are as the times are, and the library is as the times are. A 25% increase in digital electronic resources. The 500 hotspots is tremendous, in particular providing Wi-Fi for persons in need to access internet for personal or professional, or as Councilor Semple alluded to, connecting to vital services here in our community. That's so key. I did not know that our library was giving out the most amount of hotspots than any library or entity in the state. That's front page material, and kudos and thanks for doing that. Congrats on the 4-star national award. And Councilor Semple brought up space, the 4th floor in particular. Will, if you have a moment to either talk about space or next steps or how the library grows, or if you could wave a magic wand in regards to needs or whatever the council can do to get the libraries back. Is it space? How is the library growing? What do you need from us?
We're kind of an interesting time right now. I, of course, would have said pre-pandemic, space was one of our biggest concerns. That was an area we, about 3,200 people a day would come into our locations, and space was one of the things when we get our feedback cards and comments from the community, we would habitually hear that, love your library, I want more space in it. That'll be part of our community engagement to see what people want. We want to see what people are looking for in terms of what type of space they're looking for. The pandemic's changed our perception of what space is and what we're looking for. So that'll be part of what we hear from our community and what they're looking for from us.
Great. And finally, could you touch on, I was shocked it was not part of your presentation, but it's one of my favorite things about the library is the Imagination Library. In my final few seconds, could you share, for those who don't know about Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, the steps that have been taken now to offer a book to every child every child under 5 now in Lane County, getting a book delivered to them for free every month?
Yeah, it was great. Our foundation funds that program. It's free for participants. Anyone from ages 0 to 5 can have a free book sent to them every single month from the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. United Way, the foundation, and a couple of other groups got together and made sure every single person would qualify. There was a couple areas that were not within any district boundary, and we wanted to make sure that everyone had that opportunity. And so they worked really hard. Reed and the foundation, United Way, got together and made sure that happened. So I'm really proud of that. I thought that was a wonderful thing they did. And it's great that now anyone in Lane County, the answer is yes, you qualify for that.
That's so great. We have an A+ library, and I just want to say thank you to you and the team, Will. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Randy and then Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Will, and thank you to the staff of the library. I appreciate everything I've heard said so far by my colleagues, and I agree with it. in this age of instant information online and so much at our fingertips, there are some cynics who might say, what is the relevance of a brick and mortar library? I think you've proven that relevance, and I think you've actually taken it to a much higher level and provide absolute value to this community. And for that, I'm really appreciative. Another thing you said that really resonated with me, you termed what was promised, promises made and promises kept. I think that should be a lens that we look at with all of our additional monies that we bring in for projects. I know it's worked well for our road bonds. It's obviously working well for you at the library. I think that's something we need to look at with CSI expenditures. That's part of what helps us have credibility with the public, and that's what helps us continue to be able to have the resources we need to provide the services. So I really want to highlight that and thank you for weaving that into your presentation. Again, I hope we see that in other areas too, which I know we do some, but I think that's valuable. And I don't want to keep droning on. I think so much has already been said, but just one final thank you for everything you all are doing and what you provide for this community.
Claire and then Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Will, for the presentation and the incredible work. I just want to reflect for a moment. When my husband and I moved to Eugene, to Lane County specifically, but the Eugene area in 1994, this city and its residents had consistently declined to fund a new library, even though the one that existed at the time was woefully inadequate to meet the needs of the community at that time. And thankfully, library boosters persevered, and eventually voters approved the bond measure that created our beautiful and, I believe, most used public building in the city. And look how far we have come. It is amazing to see that not only do we have that lovely building as our main library, but this incredible host of services being delivered so thoughtfully and effectively to our community. It is just amazing. And just to pull out a couple of things that stood out for me in your update there, Will, I'm also really excited about the new approach you all came up with to the makerspace equipment and ensuring that it wasn't just sitting on the shelf, gathering dust, getting older, not being utilized. So that's super creative, and I'm so glad that it's worked out better than even your expectations. And I also did not know that we had the largest inventory of mobile hotspots in the state. So I agree with Councilor Keating. That's like something for us to take some real kudos over, and for this community to, I think, pat itself on the back for stepping up and seeing the value of this incredible resource and making sure the funding is still there to continue the great service that you and your team are delivering for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and then Jennifer.
Yeah, at this point, it's just kind of like jumping into the onto the choir of kudos. So please add my voice to that. Library ends up being a total bright spot during the pandemic and an important asset, and ended up being a great investment, as Claire mentioned, by our community. It's just getting better. So that's I really, hats off, Will, to you and your team for being nimble and fast and relevant, and making sure that the library is one of those things that everybody can point to and say that's a cool investment by the city and good program. More programs, more materials and technology, more hours and access is what this whole levy was about. And I think you guys hit a home run on all of that. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, Will, obviously we're all very proud from all these comments, and I am too. I loved how we're calling it Library of the Future, because one of the things that has always impressed me by our library system is how staff really thinks outside the box about not what a library is, but what a library could be. And so I'm always surprised with the different programs and services that get offered that I probably would not have thought of as being part of what a library should be, but it makes sense once I'm told. I'm like, yes, exactly, we should be doing that. So your staff is just amazing that you guys continue to come up with these, as Alan said, relevant, like being relevant for our community as we move forward. And I also just want to take a moment to be thankful for our branch libraries. You know, my family didn't spend a lot of time downtown, but we were at our branch a lot. And it made a big difference in my kids being interested in reading and going to programs there. And so I'm so glad that our community supports those branch libraries into the future as well. And that's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Emily, one more round of comments?
Yeah, a couple things I couldn't fit into my first gush. And I totally agree with Jennifer. Those branch libraries are essential. Not everybody can get downtown. It'd be nice if we had even 2 more in the rich future. But 2 things I wanted to point out, those hearing loops. We forget that we have vulnerable parts of our population that have, you know, they're blind or they can't hear, or with COVID, you can't smell or taste. I don't know how we can help with that, but that we have put the hearing loops in there. I think that's very important. And the community should know that a while ago, we put hearing loops in the airport, and our meeting room, when we finally get to be back there, also has some hearing loop type assistance. So thank you very much for reaching out and helping that population. And the other last thing is the parks. I first of all had no idea that the library reached out into the parks. And so I'm grateful that it's bilingual. That's really important. But just that the library is reaching out and finding people and bringing them in, you know, more community, more kudos. Thank you.
Thank you. And Matt and Alan both look like they need a second round. So take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Mayor. I promise I'll be 30 seconds or less. I also wanted to thank Will for joining our neighborhood association recently. And one of the greatest ideas to come out of that conversation was a South Eugene drop-off to kind of prevent or reduce our carbon footprint and provide a pathway for folks to drop off books, maybe at the Amazon Center. Just if I could just add my voice in support of such a concept, and if there's any conversation, Will, to expand drop-offs throughout the city, I'd love to lend my support. And where we at with those, or has the library had those conversations? Is that feasible in the foreseeable future?
We had talked about that pre-pandemic. That was something we had talked about, worked out with the courier system, and talked about putting them in Amazon and a couple other communities, community centers. Something that come up recently, I think last week it came up, and it kind of re-sparked an interest in that because we are a community supported organization and community center. And so we're hearing from our community that's something that they're looking for. And so we're hoping to re-engage in that, hoping we can work something out again to make sure it still works within the way the pandemic processes and things like that. So yeah, definitely interested in making it easier for folks to return books. Yeah, that's definitely on our map.
Okay, great. And apologies, I took 46 seconds. Sorry about that. Thanks.
Alan?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that beside the hotspots, which is very innovative, very relevant, and a great thing. But the one that stuck out for me that I didn't know about until this presentation was the bilingual story walks in the park. I think that is such a great idea. And, you know, it combines all of those things about being out, being active, being in our parks and reading and the bilingual nature of it, just an equity, extra bonus points. And I thought that was just something that really needed to be pointed out as something I thought was really cool.
Thank you. And Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I was feeling a little left out there, so I just wanted to say, you know, good job, Will, and, you know, me too. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. I wanted also just to chime in on one other thing. There are a couple of things that you said and some framing that you used in your presentation to us that are, I think, extraordinarily helpful across the board in issues that we face in all ways in city leadership and communicating with the public. And one is, I am very interested in those story walks and thinking, boy, can we use that in another way? I mean, is there another way is there something else we can do with that? Does that relate to another department, other work that we're doing around nature, around climate change, around transport? Can we do something else like that? And then the other thing is, I loved your framing about windows and mirrors. And windows is seeing other people, and mirrors, seeing yourself reflected. And I think that language feels really accessible and expressive. And I'm just wondering, again, as we think about our equity work and everything else, that feels like very good language to me. So I think there are seeds that you have planted in your library that I think, and I know at the executive level, people hear that, but I'm thinking for council too, for us to think about, are those seeds that we want to see spread into other areas of our work? So I really thank you for that, because I think that this engine of creativity within your staff it was powerful, and I find it inspiring. So thank you very, very much for all of that work, and what a great meeting to have beginning of the new year. So thank you so much. I know we were delayed in hearing from you at the end of the year, and in ways it's kind of really wonderful to just launch the new year with this report. So thank you again. And
Thank you for having me.
And with that, we have a second item on the agenda today, and I am going to turn that over to the city manager to introduce.
Thank you, Mayor. As we said in, I think, the AIS and in an email, we added these two items to the agenda today because we've been really trying hard not to have action items on Monday nights after long public forums where you actually have to kind of like think through things and talk amongst yourselves. So in an effort to do that, and seeing we have a little bit of an opening, I've asked Ellen to come and talk about a couple of things you'll be voting on the 24th, because I thought that you might have some more questions, and that this time would help make that a quicker action item on Monday night. Kind of a micro work session. And with that, I'll just ask you to jump in, Ellen.
Maybe we could do future ones in the park where we kind of read them as we go on.
Hey, we would love that.
Thank you very much. We do have some slides to share with you today. Good afternoon. My name is Ellen May Galloway with Community Development. I'm here today to give you some brief background information about 3 affordable housing action items that are on the council meeting agenda on Monday, January 24th. Since these items are scheduled for action after a public forum that evening, we wanted to provide you with a brief overview of the items today and make sure you had an opportunity to ask any questions you may have so we can address those in the meeting materials or at the meeting. The first 2 action items are related to an existing development owned by Cornerstone Community Housing called Oakleaf Village in the Santa Clara neighborhood. The third item is related to federal home funds for 2 exciting affordable housing opportunities in Eugene. The first action item is a standard low-income rental housing property tax exemption, or LRPT, renewal for Oakleaf Village, a 14-unit development that finished construction in 2002 and has provided affordable housing since that time. The savings from the property tax exemption are applied to lowering the rents of the development. The LRPT would expire in 2022 if not for the renewal. As you know, LRPT renewals are usually on the consent calendar, but this is an action item because we wanted to present the 2 items together since they're related to the same development. The second action item for Oakleaf Village is related to their home-funded development loan from 2001. I'll give you the highlights of what you'll see in the meeting materials, and if you have questions, let us know what additional information would be helpful. The city provided Cornerstone with a home loan to help construct the development in 2001. The loan was set up as a 30-year payable loan with a 5% interest rate. Payable loans are very unusual for home-funded developments because of the low rental income and the fact that financing requires additional private debt. The development has experienced financial challenges and has tried to refinance, but the property continues to struggle financially. With the principal and interest, Cornerstone has already repaid more than the original home loan value, but the current balance and current interest accrued is about $174,000. The 20-year home affordability restrictions are due to end on June 30th, 2022. As a condition of converting the payable loan to a forgivable loan, Cornerstone would maintain the affordability restrictions on the property through June 1st, 2031, which is the original loan term. If they were no longer required to make payments, Cornerstone would use the savings to provide resident services and to perform needed rehabilitation on the property as it continues to age. The action that Council will consider January 24th is whether to authorize the city manager to execute the necessary documents to convert the payable Oakleaf Village home loan to a 0% interest deferred payment forgivable loan on the condition that the development's affordability restrictions are maintained through June 1st, 2031. The third affordable housing action item on January 24th is for Council to consider the two exciting proposals received through the 2021 Housing Request for Proposals, or RFP, to award federal home funds. Again, today I will provide you background and highlights that will be more detailed in your January 24th meeting materials, and please let us know what questions you have. Every year, the Eugene Springfield Home Consortium makes home funds available for development projects through an RFP. This year, there were two great project proposals submitted in Eugene, which both contribute to the permanent supportive housing goal through the TAC report. The evaluation committee scored both highly, and Councillor Simple participated on that committee, so she may be able to speak to them as well. The first proposal, which scored just slightly higher, is a Dev Northwest proposal to build Polk 2.0 with 6 permanent supportive housing units and 6 rental units for a total of 12 units in common area. What the evaluation committee loved about this development is that it provides critical housing for youth who aged out of foster care or other system-engaged youth who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Dev Northwest and partners would provide services at the development. 5 units would be reserved for residents earning no more than 30% of area median income, or AMI, and 7 units would be reserved for residents earning no more than 60% AMI. The development has already been awarded all of its other financing, so it would be ready to start construction in the coming months. The second proposal is by Homes for Good to build the Coleman, 51 units of permanent supportive housing in common area for people with histories of conviction in partnership with Sponsors, Inc. And this is another housing challenged population. Sponsors would provide services in the first floor commercial space to residents and other clients. 15 units would be reserved for residents earning no more than 50% AMI, and 36 units would be reserved for residents earning no more than 60% AMI. Both of these projects are important housing opportunities for the community. On January 24th, Council will be asked to take action on a recommendation to the Home Consortium Governing Board to approve funding for these two developments. Eugene has enough home resources to fully fund the Polk 2.0 proposal at $550,000 and to fund approximately $580,000 of the Coleman proposal. However, in order to leverage the resources required for construction, the Coleman needs over $1 million in home funds. There is a way to fully fund the Coleman so that this project can move forward as soon as possible. The Eugene Springfield Home Consortium has a flexibility policy that would allow Eugene to borrow some of Springfield's unused home resources to fully fund the Coleman. Eugene would need to borrow approximately $470,000 to fully fund the Coleman's need. Eugene would use some of our home funds from next year's allocation to replenish Springfield's home allocation next year. Using the flexibility policy would allow the city to support both of these beneficial PSH developments now. On January 24th, Council will consider whether to recommend the Home Consortium Governing Board use only Eugene's home resources to fund these two development proposals, or to also request to borrow home funds from Springfield to fully fund both proposals. Please let us know if you have any questions about these agenda items that we can try to respond to, or make sure they're covered in meeting materials for January 24th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I already see a couple of 3 counselors with questions, so I'll just let Alan and Emily kick it off.
Thank you. These are awesome projects, and we need a lot more affordable housing. We just duplicate each one of these actually, if we could tenfold each one of these, that probably wouldn't even dent the problem. But I'm not, maybe Mike can answer this question, but I'm not familiar with what's the difference between a payable and a forgivable loan. That one went over my head.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that question. Oh, sorry. The payable loans mean that they make payments, so they have an interest rate. It's like a mortgage, basically. They have an interest rate and they have to pay payments on a monthly basis. And a forgivable loan, the type of forgivable loans we typically do with home loans, have no payments, and they have a forgivable if they meet their affordability restrictions for the full period of the loan, then the loan is forgiven at that point. But if they didn't fulfill their obligations and didn't keep the property affordable, they would have to repay the funds.
The part I didn't get on the forgivable, so the forgivability of the loan occurs before the end of the term of the loan, apparently. Like, instead of a 30-year, the forgivability might occur at 20 or something like that.
Well, in this case, the forgivability is at the very end. So they are obligated to repay the loan unless they completely fulfill the entire term of the loan. And then it's forgiven at the end. So if they provided almost all the years of affordable housing and then they decided we're going to make it market rate, they would have to repay the entire amount.
Okay. Last question is there any evidence of affordable housing being provided by the marketplace that's not subsidized? As far as I can tell, it's zero. And the only affordable housing that we actually get is affordable housing that the city, state, county, feds subsidize.
That's a good question. And my world is fully immersed in subsidized housing, so I'm not sure what the answer is.
Yeah, okay. I think it's zero. So if we want to meet our affordable housing goals, we need to substantially increase these programs or figure out how to get more subsidized housing, because we're never going to get there at this pace unless we do something different with the marketplace. Thanks.
Thank you. Emily and then Mike.
I think these are all exciting. We usually don't have any problem with the LRP. I'm in favor of that. And the loan forgiveness makes a lot of sense to me. When they started, it was 5%, and I think they're going for less than that now, that they've already paid back what we lent them and they'd use the money for rehab and increased services. I think that's an excellent investment. The rehabilitation maintenance is critical. I'm our liaison to the home funds, and it was really tough. They were both so excellent. It wasn't how many points can we give them, it was where can I find a point to take off. And they're really important for kind of different reasons. They're such different populations, and both of them dear to my heart. Before I became a counselor, my Smile Amazon pennies go to sponsors. So that they're both affordable and supported, things that we desperately need. The Polk one is ready to go. we need to go forward with that. I think it would be excellent if we could borrow from Springfield and pay them back, since they don't need it this year. You know, we're really one huge community. If we can get 2 places built, we're ahead all the way around, and these populations really need the support. I think they're excellent, well thought out, well supported projects, and they have the place to make them. I hope that we will support this idea. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mike, and then Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. Boy, I hate the language around this issue sometimes. I want to congratulate Alan for his question. I thought that was fun. By definition, affordable housing is subsidized. It depends, I suppose, on what you're calling affordable housing. So, you know, the market doesn't produce it, because once it's subsidized, it's not the market anymore. So I thought that was an interesting question. Ellen, 3 kind of different questions. First, with the Polk and with the Coleman, do you have completed unit development costs for each of those? Could you tell me if you have that?
You're looking for the per unit cost or the total development cost?
Unit.
Per unit cost. I should first say that this will be in your meeting materials for January 24th.
Cool.
The cost per unit on Polk 2.0 is approximately $225,000 per unit, and the cost per unit for the Coleman is approximately $380,000 per unit.
Do you have that on a square footage basis with both of them?
Oh, I didn't bring that with me today, but I will be happy to find that calculation for you.
Love to know the answer to that. Can you just say, when you're building any kind of housing, you have costs for land, you have costs for permits and for other government places where the government touches that process, and then you have labor and you have materials. Can you talk about, just in general terms, the places where the subsidies that we provide in all forms from all sources on each of these projects, what are they predominantly subsidizing the cost of?
Well, that's hard to say, because we provide the subsidy that goes into the total development cost, which includes everything. So it's not necessarily specifically applied to one cost or another. In the case of Polk 2.0, they already own the property. And in the case of the Coleman, Lane County is donating that land for the property. So I do know it's not going towards acquisition costs this year.
In both cases, the cost of the land isn't part of the development.
Yes, yes. So sometimes home resources are expected to go partially towards the acquisition costs when there are acquisition costs.
But compared to what the market provides, these 2 developments don't have to buy the land, right?
Correct. And then the construction costs are, of course, a significant amount that needs subsidy to help with that, especially in the way that construction costs have been escalating.
Yeah. And then we have property tax discounts that we add, plus SDCs, I would imagine, plus other costs that the market would incur that don't in these particular cases. Can you detail some of those?
We do have, you all approved through the supplemental budget some city fee assistance related to SDCs for both of these project proposals. And I don't know exactly what some of their savings are compared to market rates, but they also have been awarded other subsidies or for Polk, so that all their development financing is complete the Coleman is going to have to apply to the state for state resources in this year. And they have costs associated with that type of financing as well. So I think it might be comparable, but I really don't know the details of that.
And in the Coleman, what's approximately the average square footage of a unit in the Coleman?
I would be happy to bring that information back to you. I don't have the square footage materials.
Average unit, 1,000, 1,500 square feet, any kind of guess?
I think they are, I can tell you that they are studio and 1-bedroom apartments. And so I am not sure what the square footage are, but at least that's
probably not over 1,000 at that point, right? Okay, so they don't have the cost of the land, they don't have a lot of the cost of the government, and they have some subsidies for the cost of materials. But that particular one for less than 1,000 square feet still costs $380,000 per unit.
I can't really speak to all the different reasons why it's an expensive cost per unit as you're describing. We can bring back some more information about that if that would be helpful.
Well, Alan brings up a good point, and I just want to kind of highlight some of the differences that somebody working in the market to build housing versus affordable housing, the differences that they face, the differences in cost to the person finally. And my last question, I may have to take a second round for because I've only got 14 seconds, so I'll do that.
Okay, Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just have a few basic questions. For the Coleman and the Polk 2.0 in that batch of applications, were there other projects that applied for the home funds, or were these the 2 applicants?
These were the 2 applicants.
Okay. And where is the Coleman project proposed to be located?
Thank you. That will be in your meeting materials as well, but it's located in the northeast corner of Highway 99 and Roosevelt Boulevard.
Okay.
On Lane County owned property there.
On the Lane
right
County.
Across from Sponsors' current facility at Roosevelt Crossing.
Great, thank you. That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify. Do we know if Springfield is willing to let us use their unused funds? Has that question been asked?
There was a Springfield city councilor who sits on the evaluation committee who is very supportive of these 2 projects. Springfield hasn't had an application for home funds in a few years. And so they do have $1.7 million of home resources right now. And so we expect that they will be supportive of this. Especially given that we would intend to replenish their home funds next year.
Great. And then on the other development with the loans, and I think it's a great idea for us to convert that to a forgivable loan, but would their obligations under those loan terms include addressing the rehab and maintenance issues at the property?
The property is in fine condition. It's just that they will have capital needs to replace roofs, for example, and do exterior painting within the next 10 years. So it's not that it's in disrepair in any way.
Sure,
but
no.
Yes, there are property condition standards that are part of the affordability restrictions. So there is a standard of maintenance and upkeep that's required.
Okay. Great. Those are my questions. Thanks so much.
And Mike, you had another round?
You did. Thank you, Mayor. With the second or the middle property that you had mentioned, the one not proposed for construction but already existed. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember the name of it.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. It cut out for me a little bit.
the middle property that you spoke of is one that has existed for a while, and I can't remember the name of it. You remind me.
Oakleaf Village.
Oakleaf Village, that's right. You mentioned that in its regular operation financially, it was having some distress. Can you talk more about that?
Yes. So originally the loan was proposed to be a repayable loan through the home RFP back in 2000, the year 2000, I think.
If I could, that money comes from people paying subsidized rent for the location. That's what creates the opportunity for repayment of that loan, right?
Yes, it's from the rental income. They expected to, they projected over time that they would be able to afford both the debt from their private loan and debt to repay a home loan. Yes. But things didn't turn out the way they had forecast. The operating costs were higher. The rental income did not, which is limited by HUD rent limits. It didn't increase as much as was forecast. And because of that, they found that it wasn't working well to have multiple mortgage payments on the property. And they did try to refinance a few times. And we also tried to reduce the interest rate in 2017 to try to improve the financial condition. But unfortunately, the financial issues have continued. And so this was an option that they have been asking for a number of years, actually.
So were there other factors, or was it just increase in unexpectedly high costs and rent control that made it financially unfeasible?
I think that it was just higher maintenance than operating and maintenance costs than was originally forecast, and lower rental income than was originally forecast.
Well, and that's really the subject of my question. Was it the rent control, or was it that some people are during a pandemic are having trouble paying? Or I mean, are there people who are not paying? I mean, can you delineate that a little bit more?
It is, my understanding is that it was related to the rent limits not increasing at the level that was originally forecast. So it was sort of a rent control issue.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Ellen, for the presentation. I agree with Councilor Zelenka. We need probably 10 or even 20-fold more of this. At the same time, I've been sitting here pondering some comments Councilor Clark made around cost and, $385,000 per unit. And I admit my sense of cost and value is really skewed with the pandemic and supply chain shortages, labor shortages, the things that are going into this today. But at the same time, I'm sitting here pondering this, and I think 1,000 square feet for a average of between a studio and a one-bedroom apartment is probably generous. So it's probably smaller than that, which would put the cost even higher than $385 per square foot. Is there a way, when you're doing providing more information on that you could do some benchmarking, or somebody could do some benchmarking with other similarly situated projects in the community? And I'm not trying to push that we do these things on the cheap, because that never seems to hold up over time. But at the same time, I think it's our responsibility to try and stretch the dollar as far as we can get, so we can produce more units, living units for people, and especially with the dearth of available rentals in the affordable and low income level. So that would be helpful for me, if we could just see where these projects lay in comparison to others. Thank you.
Mike, one more comment.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. I just want to remind my colleagues that of something I mentioned before, that I understand that this kind of land I'm about to discuss comes at a premium. I get that. But we have so little land for the market to create housing in our city that there are about 8 lots within a matter of blocks from me in Ward 5 that for 1/8 of an acre of just dirt, there's no house on it yet, but to buy the dirt, which neither of these projects do, but the market has to contend with. And we control how much dirt there is for people to buy. The acreage that's just near me here for 1/8 of an acre goes between $350,000 and $600,000 just for the dirt. And that's because there isn't much available here. And years ago, we decided not to expand the urban growth boundary. So when these affordable housing projects come without the cost of dirt, that's awesome for being able to build stuff that people can afford to live in. But everybody else that has to buy at market rate has to contend with the fact that we've decided to artificially constrain how much land there is and increase the cost. So when the market doesn't provide something, it's because the market has been constrained. And we can do something about that to make housing more affordable if we want to. Thank you.
Thank you all. I have just a couple of sort of broad comments that I wanted to mention. And one is on my soapbox a little bit, which is that I fundamentally believe that housing is infrastructure, and that this is an important role for us to play as a community, and that these home funds are incredibly valuable, and that we are, it seems short-sighted in some way to think that housing is expensive to build. I resonate with the questions that Alan and Mike and Randy have brought up about the cost of it. We rely on nonprofit organizations to a great extent to build this publicly funded housing, and there's something wrong about that. And when we do so, we're using HUD dollars, and HUD dollars come with their very specific requirements and expectations. And so we're caught in this place. And I think it's one of the issues that I talk to, am involved with at a national level of housing is a fundamental infrastructure. We should look at it that way. We should look at the investment that way. It's not a terrible thing to use public funds to create housing, because we use public funds to create other infrastructure. So I strongly believe in that. And I then would also, as a council, are going to hear, you see the final report on the housing implementation pipeline. And so this subsidized affordable housing belongs within that larger spectrum that you're looking at. And we do look, and you have invested as a council in those lighter, quicker, cheaper housing in order to get people off the streets. And this is sort of that middle section of that range of housing. And Mike, you're really talking about that upper range of housing. And so we're trying to fit that, all of those different slots. And this is one of those very important slots. And so, I appreciate, Ellen, how specific and thorough you are in your discussion of this, and appreciate the questions that my colleagues are asking. Alan, one more comment.
Yeah, I guess a little more clarification from Mike, because $600,000 for a lot or an acre seemed like a lot. So I just flipped on Zillow, and there's 42 listings. None of them go even close to that. A lot of them are in the $60,000 to $100,000 range. I didn't see any even close to that. I'm sure there are lots like that, but it really depends on where it is and what it looks like. And maybe staff could bring back some information about what the average cost of the blank lot is. That would clarify that, because 600,000 seems like about 6 times as high as what I'm looking at.
Okay, thank you. I think with that, questions have been asked. I also really appreciate the fact that we had this opportunity to kind of review this and talk about it, and not saving that for after a long public forum night. So thank you very much for adding this agenda item today. It's, I think, really helpful. And I think with that, you all have gained an extra 20 minutes in your day. Thank you so much, and we are adjourned.